of the Muslim lands. And then you have Ibn Atiyah, who is from the far west of the Muslim land. And then you have Ibn Katheer, who is from basically the middle. And Ibn Atiyah and al-Baghawee were roughly contemporary. And Ibn Katheer was maybe 2 centuries later. And one of the things that I think you'll see from comparing these three is that there's really quite a large area of overlap between them. If you read this one or that one, you will come away with pretty much the same insights, give or take. Because since their methodology is drawing on narrations, they're working with roughly the same material. So now let's start with al-Baghawee. His name is Hussein ibn Mas'ud ibn Muhammad. He was born around 433, nobody's really sure, and he died in 516 after the Hijrah. There's a bit of dispute about the exact date of his death, but that's the dominant opinion. He was given the laqab of Muhyi al-Sunnah, yani the reviver of the Sunnah, because he was one of those scholars who he put a big emphasis on the Sunnah. He's famous for a book called Sharh al-Sunnah, in which he tried to gather the Sunnah in a comprehensive way and organize it. His book is considered quite good. It's organized well, and then he has helpful commentary on it. So he tried to sort of present one book that would give a person an overview of the whole Sunnah. And then he's also quite famous for his Tafseer, which was very well received in his time and continued to be used, and it was influential. Other scholars, they relied upon it, and some of them actually based their own tafsirs upon his tafsir. And he is also considered to be an expert in fiqh. He was Shafi fiqh. And however, his most famous works are his hadith compilation and his tafsir. And he lived in the era of the Salajiqa, the Seljuk Turks, who had displaced the Ghaznawis, and before that, the Buwayhids. The Buwayhids had been a resurgence of Iranian political power in the Islamic lands, and they had been Shiites, and they were also pretty friendly to the Mu'tazilites. And the Seljuk Turks were Ash'ari Sunnis, and they were very vigorous in their support of Sunnism, and they paid deference to the Abbasid ruler in Baghdad, even if they wielded political power fairly independently. Anyway, the Salajiqa, they were famous for building establishing a madrasa system, the first sort of systematic madrasa system in the Muslim world, and they supported scholarship and learning. And so you had a tremendous flowering of continuing development of Islamic learning among the contemporaries of al-Baghawee, or al-Ghazali, al-Kiya al-Harasi, he wrote one of the famous fiqhi tafsirs of the Qur'an, a Shafi fiqhi tafsir, and az-Zamakhshari, the famous mufassir. We'll be dealing with him in our next session. and also the Shiite Mufassir al-Tabarsi. Al-Baghawee was born in Baghshur, which is a village between Herat and Maru. And as a young man in his 20s, he moved to Maru, which in that time was a prominent city of learning. And although he perhaps did some traveling for studying in Khurasan, unusual among the major scholars of his era, he never went to Baghdad. And his book, Ma'alim al-Tanzeel, as far as its modern history, it was first printed apparently in Iran, but there was no publishing information, no date, no information of any type. So the exact publishing date is difficult to determine. Then it was published in India, in Bombay in 1891, and since then many other volumes. And then, like most Mufassirs, in their preface, he mentions that he composed his Tafseer in response to a request from students. And he wanted to produce a Tafseer of medium length. Now, his Tafseer was heavily based on that of al-Tha'labi, Abu Ishaq, Ahmed bin Muhammad ibn Ibrahim al-Tha'labi. He was also a Shafi'i scholar from, it seems like about 2 generations before al-Baghawee, because al-Baghawee, he listed in the beginning of his Tafseer his major isnads, and in that he was copying al-Tha'labi. Al-Tha'labi, he was one of the early scholars to stop quoting isnads in the actual text, and he just moved his major isnads to the preface. And al-Baghawee did the same for his the isnads by which he reported the narrations of Ibn Abbas and the major Mufassirs among the Tabi'een. When you come to hadiths, marfu' hadiths, in the text, he tends to give you the whole isnad for each of those. And most of Baghawee's isnads for the Mufassirs that he's relying upon, they pass through al-Tha'labi. So actually, al-Tha'labi, we're going to take a little detour here. He was a major influence on medieval tafsir, the tafsir genre. His book was called Al-Kashf wal-Bayan an Tafsir al-Qur'an. And it seems to have been an influence or a source on Zamakhshari. Zamakhshari was sort of reacting against it because you see that the name of Zamakhshari's tafsir, al-Kashaf, is closely related to al-Kashf. And al-Tha'labi, although he seemed to have a bunch of strange sympathies, one of his major teachers was a Karrami, who were they were extreme literalists when it came to Allah's attributes, to the point where they were most scholars consider them to be mushabbiha. They were anthropomorphists, although al-Tha'labi doesn't seem to have expressed those opinions, but he was really hostile to the Mu'tazila. The main people that he goes after in his tafsir are the Mu'tazila. He also had a lot of narrations from sources that were sympathetic to the Shiites. I'm talking about al-Tha'labi. One of his sources was al-Hakim, the author of al-Mustadrak. And eventually, Thalabi Shiite scholars, when they were Shiite scholars around the 6th century, and they were looking for ways to bolster their polemics against the Sunnis, they started looking at Sunni books for narrations that they could use against them. And one of the great finds, one of their sources, a treasure trove of information and ammunition that they used against the Sunnis was the Tafseer of al-Thalabi, because it had quite a few narrations that were talking about the virtues of Ali, and some of them kind of strange. There's the famous narration that some scholars, including al-Thalabi, used in their tafsir of the verse in Surah al-Ma'idah, in which it says, in the translation, your only walis, yani allies, protectors, are Allah and His Messenger and the believers. الَّذِينَ يُقِيمُونَ الصَّلَاةَ وَيُؤْتُونَ الزَّكَاةَ وَهُمْ رَاكِعُونَ. And it means those who establish salat and they give zakat and they perform ruku. And some scholars misinterpret this verse as meaning that and they are in ruku to mean hal. It's what these people, the way that they were giving zakat is that they're giving zakat while they're in ruku, which is kind of absurd. But they bring this narration that Ali was praying in the masjid and this beggar came and he was asking people and nobody gave him anything, but Ali motioned to him to come, and so he took his ring off and he gave it to the man while he was performing ruku. And then the verse was revealed about that, supposedly. And from a hadith point of view, that's the isnad is weak, and then from a meaning point of view, as Ibn Katheer pointed out, this is quite silly. Anyway, al-Thalabi became a source of embarrassment to Sunni scholars. With the passage of time, Ibn Taymiyyah really attacked him. On the other hand, Ibn Taymiyyah really praised al-Baghawee. He said that his was one of the best, perhaps the best tafsir that had been produced. So al-Baghawee, he basically took Thalabi's book and cut out most of the strange narrations. And Israeliyat, his tafsir is very short on Israeliyat. Some of the people who were later influenced by al-Thalabi, along with al-Baghawee, were al-Wahidi, who's most famous for his Asbab al-Nuzul, but he also did a couple of tafsirs. Al-Wahidi was Thalabi's most famous student. And then later you have Ibn Atheer. He also did a tafsir that was heavily based on Thalabi's. From al-Baghawee, you have al-Khazin, who also, basically his tafsir was a commentary on Baghawee's tafsir. One of the things that comes up now is that since these people are working with basically the same material, then what's the justification for writing new tafsirs? Especially if you're doing it bil ma'thur. And al-Thalabi addressed that in his preface to his tafsir. He said, "It is incumbent upon the author of a new work in an already established field to make sure his work has one of the following features. The work should either discover things that were overlooked, or collect that which was scattered, or explain what is obscure, or organize and systematize, in other words, that which was not organized, or the work should discard material in previous works, which is deemed unnecessary or digressive. I hope that my work will manage to achieve all of the above. May God help me finish it." So if we look at what Baghawee did with regard to what Thalabi had already done, it seems to have been substantially what he did was edit it.